Good morning, everybody. This topic is a little bit outside of what the rest of the topics in peripheral vascular disease, and I'll try to finish in time. AF suppression and stroke prevention. Of course, stroke is very much part of peripheral vascular disease, but this stroke is due to embolism from the left atrium. See, the big determinant of whether a person goes into AFib or not is the size of the atrium. And this is a very basic biological process. As we become older or as our atrium grows in size due to mitral regurgitation, AFib predisposition occurs. If you look at comparative biology, elephants are in atrial fibrillation from very early in age. Horses are invariably in AFib by the time they are about 10 years old. And rats and all are never in AFib. It is just too small an atrium to sustain disorganized re-entry. So there is no study to say that large human beings have more AFib than small-sized women, but atrial size is a very big predictor. And obviously the atrial health also, because size can sustain re-entry, but fibrosis and disorganized conduction down the atrium will also promote re-entry. The disorganization and the dishealth may be reversible. It may be some electrolyte abnormalities, it may be related to some drugs, it may be related to anoxia, or it may be irreversible abnormalities in which fibrosis and size are important predictors. Not only that, the irreversible factors and the reversible factors may be focal irritability, which acts as a trigger to precipitate AFib, or it may be a diffuse atrial disease which sustains the AFib. So we talk of AFib as something that gets triggered by very rapid activity of the atrium, PSVTs or rapid pacing or very rapid ectopic activity from the pulmonary veins. These can make a very healthy atrium go into AFib. But because it is healthy, it will not sustain it, and sooner or later the whole atrium will be depolarized by the disorganized front, and then sinus rhythm returns. But if the substrate, the atrium, is abnormal, then once the AFib starts, it may not be able to come back into sinus rhythm on its own. Although it may be healthy enough to sustain sinus rhythm once it is achieved by drugs or DC cardioversion. These patients are called permanent AFib in the sense that, persistent AFib in the sense that they will persist till you help them out of the AFib. Then last will be permanent, where it is very difficult to sustain sinus rhythm because the atrium itself is completely diseased. When we go into the risk of forming clots in the atrium because of atrial arrhythmia, there's a lot of things which change the predisposition. The bigger the atrium, the atrial appendage morphology, that is the place where many of the clots come from. The atrial electrophysiology. The atrial fibrillation may be relatively organized in some parts of the atrium, although the surface ECG will show AFib. It may not be completely disorganized activity. Of course, the thrombosis predisposition. Modern life is full of thrombosis. Modern lifestyle is highly thrombogenic. And this is a factor which is independent of the atrial anatomy and physiology. And also circulatory factors. We know that congestive heart failure slows down the circulation, and many other factors which are circulation related will also change the risk. Once again, these also will be partly reversible factors and some which are irreversible. We think of patients as either AFib or not AFib, but actually those who are having paroxysmal AFib, we should think of it as atrial load. There could be lots of patients who have 5 or 6 beats of atrial tachycardia in their holters, And there are those at the other end who cannot be in sinus rhythm no matter how many drugs you give and how many times you cardiovert them, and even if you do other procedures like RFA. But in between, the earliest would be occult AFib. A person comes to you with a stroke, he's in sinus rhythm, you do his Holter and you find that he has a few minutes of AFib. Or you do some very long recordings and you find that he does have a bit of AFib. In this also, whether it is more like flutter or more like completely disorganized makes a difference. So we should think of stroke predisposition as a continuous variable of AF load. And as I mentioned, there are lots of factors, some which are reversible and some which are not. Lasix will bring down the atrial pressures. And if the patient is in mitral stenosis and you control the heart rate, that will bring down the atrial pressures. So some of the things are not really just correcting the potassium or decreasing the catecholamines. Some of them are just related to improving the physiology of the atrium so that it can function better. Then of course, what I think most people want to hear about is the surgical and percutaneous trigger containment by isolating the atrial pulmonary veins and also by creating a maze which will prevent the disorganized rhythm from forming a endless re-entry. But I'll touch more on the drugs because that's what you'll end up using. Beta blockers can prevent AFib by reducing the catecholamine drive on the atrium, and sotalol is especially worth mentioning because it has class 3 activity as well and it can be used as a preventive drug. Amiodarone and ronabinol you know well. Of this, amiodarone needs to be mentioned. You can start low-grade AFibs, the ones that you think will stay in sinus rhythm with maintenance doses which are around 100, and after a few years, if he's doing well, even reduce it further. But stepping it up gradually as AFib keeps coming back and you have to cardiovert, I would go as far as 300 before I give up. And many patients can go on for at least a few years, maybe 5 years or so in sinus rhythm if amiodarone is used with thyroid monitoring. Ronabinol came, but right now we are not using it. Class 1A drugs we are not using, but class 1C are useful and available. You can tell the patient to keep flecainide in his pocket and take 2 pills if his heart is actually fairly normal and there is no ischemic heart disease and no CHF, etc. And it can also be used on a regular basis to prevent it. Ibutylide and azimilide are not available, but ibutylide is quite effective. More USA increasingly tends to use it as much as easily as they would write amiodarone. The time is short. I'll conclude that paroxysmal AFib requires trigger suppression by correction of reversible physiological and anatomical abnormalities and by drugs. Persistent AFib requires both trigger and substrate modification by the same techniques. You treat the patient's medical cardiac problems and give some antiarrhythmic. Permanent AFib can be approached by MAZE, but rate control and anticoagulant therapy are the current standard. Whatever treatment has been done in such patients trying to control the rhythm rather than the rate, like the AFFIRM trial and all, they've shown that trying to produce sinus rhythm is not very much benefiting the patient and controlling the rate is easier and slightly better for him. AF, the last frontier, has no visible distant shore because if the predisposing factor is aging and gradual fibrosis of the atrium with age, then that is never going to end. No matter how well we treat our patients, they will benefit from our treatments and continue to live. And if they continue to live, they will be increasingly prone to AFib. So AFib, the last frontier, has no visible distant shore. The higher we climb, the further it will stretch. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question for you. We are using dual chamber pacemakers and atrial pacing preferably to prevent AF. But there are special pacemakers with algorithms which the people are saying, the marketing people are saying that they are helpful in preventing and suppressing the episodes, even rather terminating the episodes of AF in patients who are prone to paroxysmal atrial fibrillations. Is it a marketing gimmick, or do you think it is really helpful?
No, they are effective. The thing is that you don't go in for a pacemaker so easily. You go in for conventional indications like sick sinus syndrome with syncope, etc. Now, if the patient has it, then it's nice to have a pacemaker which will have some atrial algorithms, and you can incorporate them to reduce the AFib load. But if somebody is coming with AFib and you say, I think I'll put in a pacemaker, and that pacemaker's algorithms might reduce it, that's not happening. Although it does happen when you give a lot of drugs and he starts getting bradycardic. So sinus node is part of the right atrium. As the right atrium diseases, the sinus node doesn't stay healthy. As we start giving drugs to control the AFib, we may suppress the sinus node further. But till you need a pacemaker for bradycardia, you can't put on these algorithms.
Sir, in patients who are having tachybrady syndrome, if you put a dual chamber pacemaker, and can you give flecainide to prevent episodes of
Yes,
AF?
that's what I'm saying. Once you have to use a lot of drugs, then sometimes a pacemaker is required just to prevent the bradies. And that is, you know something, the tachybrady that we studied when I was a kid had a tendency to be something intrinsic to the sinus node. Today I think 50% of tachybradys are just a reasonably good sinus node which has been excessively suppressed by days and days of very fast atrial activity. So when it returns to sinus rhythm, there is profound brady. But once the sinus node recovers, like sinus node recovery time or whatever you call it, then you can check the sinus node with all your tests and it's pretty much normal. And the same thing can be seen in patients with focal atrial tachycardias who show very profound sinus arrests and all when it terminates, but you treat the atrial tachycardia and the sinus node becomes normal. I've even seen this in a patient with reentrant PSVT due to an SSV pathway. Profound bradycardias due to sinus node suppression, the patient had incessant tachycardias. Young patient, nothing wrong with the sinus node.
Regarding the question you said that pacemaker company has started AF suppression algorithm in their pacemaker to prevent the atrial fibrillation. And the study which was done is called ASSERT study, and what they have found that there is no benefit, more consumption of battery and short life of the battery. So
but we'll use these algorithms once we decide to put in a pacemaker for brady.
Yes, the sick sinus syndrome patient having atrial fibrillation, there this atrial overdrive pacing algorithm for frequent atrial ectopics has not shown benefit scientifically.
So it is better to give them flecainide to prevent AF
and give
rather than using these algorithms.
Yeah. Instead of algorithm, use anti-arrhythmic drugs.
One cannot depend on these algorithms.
No. Rather it consumes battery, and so it lowers the life of the pacemaker.
Any role of renal denervation in atrial fibrillation? Because increased sympathetic activity does contribute to...
So basically, when you treat a patient who's got paroxysmal or treatable atrial fibrillation, you have to correct every aspect of biology that you can. That's why I said even Lasix is lowering the LA pressure, it is going to improve the chances of the patient staying in sinus rhythm. Well, good treatment of the congestive heart failure with ACE inhibitors and etc. will improve his chances of maintaining sinus rhythm. And anything that is improving his circulation and biology, circulatory biology will increase his chances of staying in sinus rhythm.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Dr. Ravi Bajaj.